Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nicholas Davenport, aka Mr. Mental Muscle, here with Katrina Steady of Steady Performance. Now, we're just talking about leadership. Now, I know it might be cliche. Everyone says you need to be a leader, take charge, be a boss. That's something we say, be your own boss
Mhm.
nowadays. But what does being a leader actually mean in your words?
Sure. So I think leadership, there's no right or wrong way. It's you identifying what does leadership mean for you and what's going to work best for you. So we've seen leaders that are introverted and are amazing leaders. We've seen leaders that are extroverted and are amazing leaders. It's all identifying what are your values, your North Stars, and then aligning that with your behaviors so that you can live those behaviors, articulate those values and behaviors to others so they know what to expect from you as a leader, and that I think is the essence of what a leader should do and be.
I like that analogy, the North Star, because those who don't know navigation, that's your guide, right? Your guiding light. So I
Yeah.
like how you use that. So going back to extroversion, introversion, I love personality psychology personally. It's one of my favorites. I've done some research myself, and I think people get a misconception, like you said, there's introverted leaders, extroverted leaders,
Mm.
and go into more so how that works. Because some people think if you're a leader, you got to be take charge, barking orders,
Mm.
and always be the one on the scene. But how does that look
Yeah.
if you're not an extrovert?
Well, I think there's different behavioral styles, and I'm going to bring up the DISC assessment, for instance, which is a great tool for people to understand a little bit more about themselves and their behavior. And so we know that there's individuals that are going to be drivers that make things happen, and that's great. But then you have the shadow side of that where they're pushing too hard, they're pushing their team too hard, and it's exhausting. You have people who are influencers, they're all about the people, bringing people together, and they're very optimistic. But sometimes the downfall of that is you're overly optimistic and maybe aren't true to reality. And then you have the steadiness folks that are a little bit
Steady.
more chill, right? Steady, they're loyal, they're all about bringing the people together, harmony. But then the downside of that is sometimes they're a little bit slower paced and they want to get everyone's perspective first before making a decision. And that can hold people back. And then the last one is leaders who are maybe more compliant and are all about details. And that's great. Again, people who are doing their research and making sure that they're putting the best product out there, but then they could be seen as a perfectionist, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So, all of these different styles, and depending on whatever assessment you take, there are the pros and cons to it. But it's you having the self awareness and knowing what are the strengths you're going to bring to the table and harness, and what are the things that you need to hold back on, and maybe be flexible when it comes to others and their style.
so I think a lot of people in our industry, like you mentioned previously, that sports psychology or just performance psychology is only for athletes or high level performers. And I think the corporate wellness or organizational industries, I've worked with them a lot as well. And I think I've done probably more stuff with them than at this point now in my career, athletes. And I think what you guys are doing,
Mm.
that lane needs to be explored more because even though it's not a sport, it's still a team. And they still have objectives, they still have performance metrics. And there's actually, I'm not saying athletes don't have real
Mm.
ties to it, but I think in the corporate or the organizational world, there's actually more at stake in a sense because winning and losing a game definitely sucks. But like you got quarterly like earnings you need to hit
Mm.
or maybe certain HR or turn whatever it is,
Yeah.
and they got to handle all that. So I think what you guys are doing needs more exposure.
That's huge. And I feel like two things too that you said, and it's like there's fire drills, and depending on what organization you're at, a fire drill could be really small. And in some organizations, a fire drill could be a huge issue that could impact many people internationally. And
Wait,
it is a
can
fire
I
drill.
interject? Let's
Yeah.
assume I know nothing because I
Yeah.
don't know a lot. But fire drill, I know you're not talking about pulling the alarm and
No,
walking
no, no,
outside
no,
single fire. I
no,
know that's not
no,
okay. I
no.
was making sure. So
Like
give
the
me
metaphorically, right? Like something happens. So maybe a customer calls and they're not happy with whatever the product is that you're selling to them. And you have to now fire drill. Let's fix it.
okay,
Let's call the customer up. We got to, act fast, a sense of urgency.
okay.
So there are small things that, yeah, it's not really a fire drill. And then there's things that really truly are and can impact people's lives.
You know what I thought it was when you said it?
What's that?
You call a bunch of people in the office like you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. It wouldn't have been illogical, right? How you said it with that kind
Yeah.
of urgency in your voice, I'm like, dang, that's how they do it.
But that's a good
They just
example
fire
of like
everybody.
there's just
I've
language in
been
the
fired
corporate
before or laid off.
environment that we're trying to translate to the sports psychology aspect of it that we don't know until you're in the corporate environment and you learn that language, right?
Okay, I
Yeah.
learned something new here.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious for you though, if you've worked with corporations,
Mhm.
what has maybe been your go-to or the biggest favorite when you've maybe supported corporate with the topics you cover?
Oh, okay. So I'll give you insight. So we mentioned this yesterday when we first talked. When I work with Aetna Insurance, all the organizations they provide insurance for, I come in as a vendor or a contractor to do different things like say workshops. So when it comes to that, I work like the sheriff's office. I work with whole cities
Mhm.
sometimes. So when I do those, I kind of try to keep it simple. Like I have some that I create on my own that are more like showy. So I'll use that one since that was more, I think, what
Mhm.
you're getting at. So I have one called Lies of a Survivor. You probably like,
Whoa.
what does that have to do? And it sounds kind
Tell
of
us about that.
so this okay, you ready? I'm a
Yeah, yeah.
storyteller. This is supposed
Go
to be your
ahead.
moment, but
No, I
you
want to
put
hear
it
this
on me.
story, Nick. Yeah.
All right, so Gloria Gaynor, she wrote a song, or not wrote, she has a song called I Will Survive.
Hmm.
Familiar with it? First, I was
Yeah.
afraid. I'm not gonna sing because that's not what I do. So basically, I'm telling the story of that song. So Dino Fakaris, he's actually the guy who wrote the song. So
Hmm.
Dino Fakaris worked for Motown Records back in the late 60s, early 70s, probably a little before your time, so you might not know about Motown. But basically, Dino Fakaris wrote numerous hits, number one singles while
Hmm.
at Motown, but unfortunately he got let go, fired, or whatever you want to call it. And then he had trouble finding work. So for about 2, 3 years, he got no luck, and he was this close to giving up. And he was like, "Well, I guess I'm not meant to be a writer." So he's watching TV, and a song comes on. It's a theme song for a movie that he wrote.
Yeah.
So he saw that as a sign that he should not give up.
Hmm.
So he says he jumps on his bed. I will survive. I'm gonna be a songwriter. Those are his
Hmm.
words. He pins, "I will survive."
Hmm.
So you would think, oh my gosh, that's such a great success story. He made a hit song. That's not where it's took off yet.
Hmm.
So 2 years would go by that no label picked it up. So if you don't know
Hmm.
the music industry, you can write songs, you can shop them around. Some labels like, hey, we want this for this artist, or we want this
Hmm.
for this group. It wasn't happening.
Hmm.
So one day, Gloria Gaynor, her label were looking for someone to write a song or rewrite a song or rearrange that was already a hit single in the 50s. It was called Substitute.
Hmm.
So this song, he rearranged it, rewrote it, and they're like, great. He said, but can I put I Will Survive as the B track to the single? So
Hmm.
Gloria Gaynor, who had just came off tour, actually recovered from injuring her back very severely. She had to kind of
Hmm.
almost learn to walk again.
Hmm.
She had gone through an abusive relationship with her ex,
Mm.
and her mom passed from cancer. This
Oh
all
my
happened in like a
gosh.
few
Yeah.
years. So
Hmm.
when she read the lyrics to I Will Survive, she was like, this resonates.
Yeah, that's true
So
for
they
her right
recorded, and it turns out that song got all the play. All the DJs wanted to spin I Will
now.
Survive. And then finally, you can say, okay, became a hit single, sold millions of records, went
Hmm.
diamond, or not diamond, but on platinum,
Hmm.
became the first and only Best Disco Grammy Award.
Hmm.
And the moral story is what? Never give up on your dreams. Keep pushing as long as you have to drive, and you will eventually accomplish it, right?
Yeah.
Wrong.
Oh,
That's the lie.
oh, oh.
Enter survivorship bias.
Yes.
So a lot of people aren't familiar with survivorship bias, but that's basically just we only tend to see the things that last.
Yeah.
Oh, you can make it in Hollywood. I remember enter Brad Pitt or whoever, they
Hmm.
slipped in their car and they eventually got their big break. That's a
Hmm.
survivorship bias because you know why? What about the hundreds of thousands of people who slipped in their car and never got their big break? They're
I
still
see what
working
you're
as a
saying.
diner.
It was that one
So
time.
the premise, I set them up. So how I tell it a little more eloquently, and I usually have the music playing too to kind of give a
Yeah,
theme.
yeah,
But
yeah.
basically, I'll start off the session with that. And then they'll be like, what do you mean? And I'll just break their confidence on purpose, not to be mean, but it's like a setup for them.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I go into different ways to override it and say, you know what? Let's look at all parts of the scenario. Where did
Mm.
not just the Dino Fakaris, which I will survive, but anything, whether it's your own life, whether it's with athletes, because we can all
Mhm.
say, look at what Michael Jordan did. He was undersized going into high school and he got cut. Okay,
Mhm.
not everyone's Michael Jordan. Let's look at
Mhm.
the people who didn't survive, or in this case, failed,
Mhm.
see what they're doing too,
Yeah.
because you might get even a better story, a better picture from the ones who didn't make it. Because not only do you learn what to do, you learn what not to do.
Yeah.
If you're about to start a restaurant in a very risky industry, let's say a business in a restaurant in a very risky industry, wouldn't you want to know the ones who went out of business in 2 months,
Yeah.
2 years, 1 year, 5 years?
Mhm.
Because the ones that are thriving, they'll tell you all the ups and downs to get to thriving. But what about the
Mhm.
people who failed in 1 month? I want
Mhm.
to know what they did wrong, so I don't do that. So
Yeah.
that's what the workshop's about. And I integrate actually some of my cognitive tests too, where it gets more applied. So now they can take what they learn and say, can they hold that same kind of mindset doing these fun tasks? And it's very like cohesive. It's almost like a team building
Yeah,
drill.
yeah.
That's what I do a lot of that with my corporate wellness. So I work
Oh,
with numerous organizations like that.
that's beautiful.
So
I
yeah.
love it. It's the idea that you can learn from not only the mistakes, but learn from the successes, but then there's the outliers, right? That we got to be aware of. But let's spread the understanding to everybody and how there's an opportunity to learn from all of those areas. I think that's great.
Matter of fact, I'll give you one more on that. So
Oh,
you
yeah,
said
yeah.
outliers.
Okay.
You ever watch American Idol?
Yeah.
So if you don't watch it, even if you don't know, you probably heard that show, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
out of all the people who have the biggest careers who've been a contestant on that show, maybe one or maybe two, I can say. Kelly Clarkson.
Yeah, I'm like thinking about these people.
There's one
Is it
more
Carrie Underwood?
It might be Carrie Underwood.
Okay,
That
yeah.
actually won.
Yeah.
Jennifer Hudson did not win.
Oh.
Who else? Fantasia did. Well, did she win? Well, basically, the point is, majority of people that get the biggest platinum records and all that aren't the winners. And there's people who won. There's one guy who won in 2015. I forget his name. He only sold like 7,000 records. And if you don't know a music record, that's horrible.
Okay.
I could probably sell 7,000 records if I really try. I don't sing. But the point is, those are the people we don't look at. No, what
but
about
they
that?
got the exposure and the opportunity, and then it's what they did with it, right? The next thing.
Yep.
That's
exactly.
awesome. That's a good story.
Survivorship bias. I love talking about cognitive biases in general. Like I talk about the fundamental attribution error, and I like to tie them all into how does this make sense in our daily lives, because they all do make sense. Our brain wants to make sense of everything we see and do, but sometimes it makes those errors. And if we can learn those errors, we may not make them as much, as much. But yeah, you flip this on me, it's supposed to be about you.
But it all comes full circle, like from a leadership perspective.
Hey, there you go.
It's all about perception, and your biases can impact you on the team that you're creating, the people that you're hiring on, and how you treat your team. And they really need to be aware of those biases so that they can be inclusive, hire the right people, and develop their team appropriately and fairly. So I think that it all comes full circle.
All right. So I agree. So, hey, nice day to wrap it up. So tell the people where they can find you online, sites, social media, all the above, so they can plug in with you if they need any services or got connects.
Yes. And I definitely offer one-on-one coaching, do team aspects, and obviously in the corporate environment. Yeah, I'm at Steadfast PC at Instagram. And then my website is steadfastperformanceconsulting.com. And again, I'm Katrina Setti. So find me, reach out to me, and I'm here to support you.
All right. Thanks for coming on and get your mind right.
Thank you.